Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Goodale, and I'll be your tutor for today. And we're going to work on strategies to gain confidence and proficiency with the SAT reading passage. So, to start, we'll go around and state our names. And I know that when you're meeting a lot of new people at once, it can be a lot of pressure to think about something that's going to make you sound memorable or interesting, or maybe you don't want to share too much. So I'll invite you to share anything at all that you want to share. And it can be an interesting fact or it can be a boring fact. So, by way of example, I'll say, I really don't like coffee ice cream. I like ice cream and I like coffee, but I can't do coffee ice cream. So, that's my non interesting fact. And then we'll go around and share. So, I'll share my screen and show you sort of the agenda as well as what will the passages that you'll get in the chat in the chat. We're gonna be working with one kind of representative reading passage, science passage. So I'll put that to you in the chat. And specifically, here's the agenda for today. We'll go around. We've gone around and introduced ourselves. Um, we'll discuss the content of the passage of the section, excuse me, so you know kind of what to expect. And then we're going to get into really the meat of the lesson, which are the strategies that I want to teach you for today. And there aren't many of them, so there'll be few enough that you can memorize them. So there will be your reading passages will be taken from a handful of, and only a handful of categories. You'll have, and actually, if you go back to our shared document here, you'll see that you'll have you'll have one literary passage, so a passage that is usually fiction, prose fiction, a passage about history. So this is a passage that's sort of like a about a historical event or a person, but it's nonfiction. And then you'll have a social science passages, and these can be sometimes off-putting because they can be speeches. So sometimes you'll see quotation marks. Sometimes you'll see quotation marks within quotation marks when a speaker is engaging with like an absent interlocutor. And then you'll have a science passage. So you'll get one of each. And sometimes you'll have two passages that are sort of in dialogue with one another. But really, as we'll see, those passages can be treated in isolation, accepting maybe just one or two questions. There are, last I checked, I think there are 52 questions on the reading section. And I think you have just over an hour, 65 minutes to do it. But what I hope to convince you of today is that you you really don't need a lot of time for the questions. Give yourself time for the reading, and the questions, if we've done our job right as readers, will seem, most of them, as simple as just writing your name or filling out your birthday. It'll seem very mechanical once we gain some confidence, and the skills that will give us confidence for the reading passages. So the three skills, for in the interest of full disclosure, that I want to impart are that when you're reading, you read in such a way that you feel like you're emphasizing, under your breath, of course, if you're in a test center, the big words or the main points. You don't get bogged down by words that you've never seen, or words that you maybe even can't even pronounce. You can even just say something silly like blah, 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 especially on the science passage, every time a given word comes up, because you're not going to be required to know really discipline specific words. So don't waste your time thinking about how that word is pronounced or what is its etymology. And another thing related to this sort of, I'm going to call this strategy sort of deliberate reading or intentional reading, and I'll show you how do we do that. Um, and as part of that strategy, guys, don't feel like you need to write anything down. Some people love writing things down. I'm a big fan, and this is again to be protective of your time. I'm a big fan of writing it down in your head. So what do I mean by that? I mean, summarizing the paragraph after you, and sometimes depending on the format of a given passage, sometimes passages won't lend themselves to or won't exhibit natural breaking points like paragraphs, but stop yourself every 3 or 4 sentences and say, what the heck is what's the deal with that? What did I just read? So basically deliberate intentional reading, sometimes people call it active reading, same thing. And the next strategy that we're going to practice today is you're going to predict your answers. So we'll go around, depending on the size of our group, we might do this in breakout rooms, but we're going to read a question and I'm going to ask you, one of you, for the answer to that question, but I won't accept A, B, C, or D because I want to hear it from you, right? I want to hear it, what you think is the answer and how you guys are way cleverer than probably these people that have been writing these test questions probably for their whole careers. You can think of much more clever and interesting ways to capitulate a passage than, encapsulate an answer than probably the test itself can. So we're going to hear from you what you think the answer is in your own words. If you need to cover up the answer choices, then do that. Finally, and the last of the 3 strategies that we're going to work on today is, and this is one that you don't have to employ in the test, but it's a coaching strategy that I've used because I think it's important that you understand that there are wrong answers. The right answer is the right answer, and the wrong ones are wrong, not just because the test says so, but because you have bad luck on tests, but for specific reasons. And I'm going to back to our agenda. When you're doing this in our big group or in small groups, again, depending on the size, there are 4 reasons, there are 4 buckets you can put your wrong answers into for the purpose of today's lesson. It's too broad, it's too specific, the concept is unrelated, or the relationship is actually reversed as it's expressed in the wrong answer choice. Okay, so here we go. Let me demonstrate what I mean by sort of an exaggerated or a deliberate reading. All right, this looks like this is about 5 trillion plastic pieces weighing over, that's a lot of tons, right? I'm not going to worry about, is that millions, billions? It's a lot of tons, right? That's okay, cool. From 2014, kind of recent. So I'm kind of just acquainting myself with the blurb. The blurb is important. Don't totally skip it. All right. Plastic pollution is globally distributed across all oceans due to its properties of buoyancy and durability. And the absorption of toxicants by plastics while traveling through the environment has led some researchers to claim that synthetic polymers in the ocean should be regarded as hazardous waste. Though photodegradation and other weathering processes, plastics fragment and disperse in the ocean, converging in the subtropical gyres. Accumulation of plastic pollution also occurs in closed bays, gulfs, and seas. Now, pause, paragraph break. Instead of taking notes, I'm an active reader, so I'm going to say, okay, Sarah, okay, self, or however you call yourself, okay, self. What's the gist here? What's the deal with this? Why did I read this? There are lots of plastics in the ocean. When they decay, there's other weird toxic stuff going on. Do I sound like I'm an expert? No, you don't have to sound like an expert. You just have to be an active reader. Notice I didn't, in my casual summary there, I didn't use the word photodegradation, toxicants, right? I just said there's some bad stuff going on, lots of plastic, it's decaying, bad news. So that's what I sort of mean by active reading. Okay, and I'll continue in stride, and then maybe we'll just do one practice question. Despite oceanographic model predictions of where debris might converge, estimates of regional and global abundance and weight of floating plastics have been limited to microplastics less than 5 millimeters. Using extensive published and new data, particularly from the Southern Hemisphere, subtropical gyres and marine areas adjacent to populated regions, corrected for wind-driven vertical mixing, we populated an oceanographic model of degree distribution to estimate global distribution and count and weight densities of plastic pollution in all sampled size classes. Okay, what's the gist here? Okay. In the old days, right? In the old days, we could only measure them when they were a certain size. Now we know where the wind is. We can account for the wind patterns. And we can have now scientists have a fairly accurate map showing where this plastic is and how much it weighs. Good. Plastics of all sizes were found in all ocean regions, converging in accumulation zones in the subtropical gyres, including southern hemisphere gyres where coastal population density is much lower than in the northern hemisphere. While this shows that plastic pollution has spread throughout all the world's oceans, the comparison of size classes and weight relationships suggests that during fragmentation, plastics are lost from the sea surface. Okay, end of paragraph. What is my active reading strategy? I'm going to recap the passage in my own words. Let's see. We've got lots of plastic that's somehow disappearing from the surface. Like we know the plastic's in the ocean, but it's disappearing from the surface. Let's see, population density lower in southern hemisphere. Maybe that's interesting. I don't know. The fewer people, or excuse me, more people, more dense population in the southern hemisphere. That's another kind of point from that. All right. The observations that there is much less microplastic at the sea surface than might be expected suggests that removal processes are at play. These include UV degradation, biodegradation, ingestion by organisms, decreased buoyancy due to fouling organisms, entrainment in settling detritus, and beaching. On the real test, I would not slow down to pronounce those. I'd be like, okay, stuff, other stuff, right? And breaching. Fragmentation rates of already brittle microplastics may be very high, rapidly breaking small microplastics further down into ever smaller particles, making them unavailable for our nets. Blah, 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 really small nets. Many recent studies also demonstrate that many more organisms ingest small plastic particles than previously thought, either directly or indirectly via their prey. Okay, so I just want to get to, and now in a real class, I would kind of demonstrate the first paragraph, strategy of active reading, and then I would maybe read the second, but then put it to the students to kind of summarize it in their own words, and then have people themselves kind of read theatrically or actively at the very least. Okay, so I want to show you this kind of strategy of predicting one's answer. I'm going to read question 1. According to the passage, ocean plastics are found in greatest quantities in, not going to pay attention to the answers yet. I'm going to say, where are the greatest quantities? Where are there the most plastics? Let's see. They were saying converging. I remember seeing population density, but that's not the same as plastics. Population is people, much lower than in the northern hemisphere. So excuse me, low population density in the southern hemisphere. But what about the plastics? Accumulation. It's accumulation, a lot of it in the subtropical gyres, including the southern hemisphere. Okay, so subtropical hemisphere, subtropical gyres. Those are the two answers I want. Oh, sweet. There's only one option. Okay, so don't let the answers, they're not there to help you. Okay, the answers are not there to help you. Any other test, I would rather have a multiple choice test than an open-ended test. However, on the SAT, it's always best if you can play offense rather than defense. All right. Now for that final strategy that I just mentioned in our agenda, and I'll close with this. Let's convince ourselves why the wrong answers why the wrong answers are wrong. Well, densely populated areas. I think, remember there was an option here. I think this was maybe an unrelated concept, right? Because you might have heard me as I was like kind of mumbling to myself, population is people, right? So densely populated areas, that's an unrelated concept, right? We care about people, we care about plastics. Areas that are not affected by UV radiation. Again, unrelated concept. We're talking about UV radiation, but that basically they're saying that plastics can get moved from the surface from UV radiation, but it's still there, right? In the tiny, tiny pieces. Okay. And then coastal regions. I did see something about coastal regions, but I'm going to say again, is that either an unrelated concept or a reversed relationship. Let's see. Coastal population density is much lower. Yeah. So it's just saying, hey, people live, not as many people live on close to the coast in the Southern Hemisphere. Unrelated concept. Okay. So again, in the real test, what would be different than that which we just did is I would not pause to really enunciate some of the scientific words. I would probably not on a real test go through all the wrong answers and convince myself why they were wrong. That is a coaching strategy that I use to convince you that the wrong answers can be categorized. Okay. And by recognizing that they can be categorized, hopefully you can, convince yourself of why a given wrong answer is wrong if you really are torn on a test. All right. So maybe we'll practice individually and have fun.